They never rush, not when the heartbeat quickens, not when the eyes begin to widen, not even when the body begs for mercy, because the slow killer knows something the rest of us forget. That time itself can be a weapon. Inside every cup of tea, every spoon of sugar, every careful smile, lies a calculation so quiet it almost feels like affection. The poison isn't always chemical. Sometimes it's patience. It begins with observation, a study. They watch routines, measure trust, map vulnerabilities. They memorize how the victim breathes, how they stir their coffee, how they react to kindness. Every habit becomes data, every weakness an opening. The act of killing to them is not an impulse. It's choreography, slow, precise, like a symphony written in silence. The art of waiting is the first lesson. A slow killer never does. They prepare. They let the poison of anticipation seep in before any toxin touches the blood. They understand that control is not about force, but delay. To wait is to dominate time itself, to let the victim live long enough to feel the erosion, to make them think they're safe, even as the invisible corrosion begins. Imagine a dinner table, the candlelight soft, the smile disarming, the wine smooth and deliberate, every gesture rehearsed, every ingredient exact. The poison, if there is poison, is not meant to kill swiftly. It's designed to introduce doubt. A cough here, a fever later, a doctor's confusion, weeks of uncertainty, months of fear, and through it all, the killer watches quietly, savoring the unfolding chaos like an artist admiring their work. There's beauty in their restraint, not moral beauty, aesthetic beauty. They move through the world like shadows behind lace curtains, always there, never fully seen. They know the rhythm of consequence. They know when to hold back and when to let entropy finish the task. Patience becomes an instrument sharper than any blade, because a knife must be used. But time bleeds by itself. What fascinates psychologists isn't just the cruelty, it's the composure. Most murders are messy, impulsive, desperate. But the slow killer, they live in the delay. They thrive in the long silence between cause and effect. It's not about the kill. It's about the control of decay. You can almost hear their internal dialogue. If I can wait, I win. If they doubt, I'm already inside them. In interrogation rooms, they rarely flinch. No adrenaline tremor, no shaking hands. They speak with the same calmness they had while stirring that tea. To the profiler, this is the most chilling detail. Their heart rate mirrors that of someone meditating. The line between serenity and sadism dissolves, because patience, taken to its extreme, is indistinguishable from cruelty. History has met them before. Arsenic wives in Victorian parlors, physicians who slipped morphine into medicine, lovers who waited months for symptoms to bloom, even generals who starved entire towns, not out of rage, but method. Each believed they were artists. Each claimed to give fate a little push. But fate, for them, was never an accident. It was management. There's a silence unique to slow deaths. It stretches over hospital rooms, over empty kitchens, over letters never sent. And within that silence, the killer feels closest to God, because God, too, kills slowly, with disease, with years, with inevitability. To imitate that rhythm is to feel omnipotent, to blur the line between punishment and creation. In psychology, this is known as temporal dominance, the belief that power comes from extending suffering through time. It's not enough for the victim to die. They must realize they're dying, and that no one believes them. This is where the cruelty hides, in disbelief, in the doctor who says it's stress, in the friend who says you're imagining things, in the lover who smiles and says, "Trust me." By the time truth arrives, it's too late to scream. The art of waiting requires a specific kind of faith. Faith that the world will keep turning, that the poison will do its work, that no one will notice the trembling hand that poured it. The killer has already detached. They live one step ahead of consequence. They can sit at a bedside, hold the same hand they're destroying, and whisper comfort without irony. That's what makes them terrifying. Not the act, but the empathy simulation. When investigators finally piece it together, they often say the same thing. He looked peaceful. She seemed kind. They didn't look like killers. Because patience erases suspicion. People expect violence to be loud, desperate, frantic. They forget that cruelty can wear patience like perfume. The slow killer never needs to run. They walk through time with the calm of inevitability. Every step rehearsed, every pause deliberate, every second another stitch in the quiet tapestry of death. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The ticking, not from a clock, but from the mind itself, counting the moments, savoring the intervals between guilt and gratification. To them, waiting is the pleasure. To them, the sound of time dying slowly is music, and in that music, they find peace. Poison is not a substance. It's a philosophy. It teaches control. It demands calculation. It rewards restraint. Most killers act once. The poisoner acts continually. Every drop is a decision. Every waiting hour, a ritual. To understand them, you must first understand their obsession with dosage. Too much, and the illusion breaks. Too little, and the agony never matures. It's a conversation between chemistry and conscience, between what can be seen and what must remain invisible. The poisoner studies that boundary with religious devotion. They aren't trying to end life quickly. They're trying to compose an experience, a slow descent, layer by layer, into a private hell only they understand. Arsenic, cyanide, thallium, names that sound clinical until you whisper them in a kitchen. But those are merely instruments. What truly fascinates them is the tempo, the rhythm between cause and discovery. Poison is the only murder weapon that can pause. It allows space for reflection, for guilt to ferment, for the body to betray itself in slow motion. They watch symptoms emerge the way an artist watches light change over a canvas. A slight tremor, a loss of appetite. Hair thinning like the season itself is withdrawing. They are present for every moment of deterioration, every denial, every hopeful doctor's visit. Patience is their masterpiece. And inside that patience lies the thrill, not of violence but of control over vitality itself. The poisoner's relationship with their victim is intimate, more intimate than a knife, because it requires proximity without suspicion. They must feed them, comfort them, watch them sleep. They must smile, touch, listen. They become caretaker and executioner at once. They tend to the sickness they designed. They offer empathy for the pain they orchestrated. It's not sadism in the physical sense. It's psychological authorship. A god writing a slow apocalypse inside one chosen body. Investigators often describe these killers as meticulous or calm, but those words feel insufficient. They are faithful to the ritual. They believe in the process of corrosion. They wait not for death, but for confirmation that they were right about human frailty. Each symptom becomes validation. Each doubt, a test passed. Each day that the victim still trusts them, a triumph. In interviews, one poisoner once said, "I liked watching her recover. It meant I could start again." Recovery for them is not relief. It's reset. It proves the formula works. They oscillate between cruelty and compassion, doctor and destroyer, savior and sentence. The poisoner's duality is not performance. It's the essence of their design, because to make someone suffer slowly, you must first make them believe they're safe. Poison, unlike other tools, is democratic. It requires no strength, no speed, only stillness and nerve. That's why it has always been a weapon of those who feel powerless. Wives in gilded cages, servants ignored, patients dismissed, lovers betrayed. They find in chemistry what they cannot find in conversation, a language that speaks without shouting, a whisper that kills louder than any scream. To them, poison is the great equalizer, and patience, the only justice left. But beneath that justice lies something colder. Not revenge, not even hatred, just curiosity. What happens when power moves invisibly? What happens when death becomes a secret shared only between two people? One aware, one unaware? That intimacy, once discovered, never leaves the mind. It becomes addictive. Because nothing else in life offers that combination of control, secrecy, and admiration for one's own design. Toxicologists call it the arrogance of invisibility, the belief that because you can't see the weapon, you can't be caught. This illusion sustains the poisoner. It feeds their calm. Even when the investigation begins, they attend funerals. They weep on cue. They volunteer details. They appear helpful. Every gesture rehearsed. Every tear genuine in performance, if not in purpose. To the profiler, poisoners exist on a unique axis of pathology. Part narcissist, part voyeur, part perfectionist. They require feedback to feel alive. But unlike most predators, their feedback is physiological. They watch the body decline the way others watch applause. When the skin pales, they exhale. When the pulse weakens, they sleep better. It's a science of serenity. Each symptom a confirmation of their authorship. Poison teaches them rhythm. To wait 3 days before another dose. To calculate the weight of a teaspoon against the fragility of a heart. To time illness so that it aligns with an alibi. They build timelines like composers write scores. Every note placed, every silence intentional. Because silence is where the poison works best. It's unseen, unheard, unstoppable. What separates them from mere sadists is structure. The poisoner sees beauty in consistency. They don't want chaos. They want sequence. And within that sequence, they find peace. The same peace that doctors find in diagnosis, or artists find in detail. Their cruelty isn't emotional. It's procedural. Each step executed as if dictated by invisible law. Observe, administer, document, wait. To them, morality is inefficiency. Empathy, a distraction. The only truth that matters is that the body will obey chemistry long before it obeys conscience. The most dangerous poisoners aren't those who hate. They're those who study, those who view life as an experiment, and people as hypotheses. They take notes, they keep records, they analyze outcomes. To them, death is data, a measurable result, something that can be replicated with precision. And replication means mastery. That's why when they're caught, they rarely apologize. They explain. They teach. They correct investigators on details of absorption rates. Their crime is not chaos. It's curriculum. When asked why she did it, one woman replied quietly, "He never noticed me until he was dying." It wasn't hatred that drove her. It was recognition. The poison made her visible. That's the paradox of slow killing. To feel alive, they must orchestrate death. Patience becomes identity. Waiting becomes proof of existence. And once that identity forms, it's irreversible. They no longer know who they are without it. The body eventually yields. The heart slows. The blood forgets how to carry oxygen. The mind turns inward. Every cell obeys chemistry's final decree. But the killer, waits still. Even after the last breath, they linger, not for remorse but for silence. They need to hear it. The absolute quiet after a prolonged design fulfills itself. To them, that quiet is sacred. It's the sound of completion. Poison, they believe, is the most honest weapon ever made. It doesn't lie. It doesn't scream. It simply fulfills the laws of its nature. And in that purity, the poisoner sees reflection. Themselves, unflinching, patient, inevitable. Because to master poison is to master time, and to master time is to play God. Slowly, softly, beautifully. Not every poison enters through the mouth. Some begin in the mind. The slow killer understands this better than most scientists ever could. They know that pain, when properly managed, becomes confusion, and confusion, when prolonged, becomes obedience. This is the evolution of cruelty, from physical decay to mental erosion, a patient form of violence that doesn't wound the body first. It wounds perception. They begin with suggestion, a word misplaced, a tone slightly altered, a glance held too long. The mind absorbs these details quietly and soon begins to mistrust itself. That's the secret. Make the victim doubt their own senses. Make them question if they're overreacting. Make them apologize for noticing. It's not murder of flesh, but murder of certainty. In cases of psychological poisoning, there's often no toxin to trace, no chemical, no residue, only a timeline of subtle manipulations. Gaslight, layered upon gaslight, until the victim collapses under the weight of belief distortion. The killer's patience here is surgical. They don't shout, they whisper. They let the victim participate in their own undoing. Cruelty, in this form, wears the mask of care. They ask, "Are you sure you took your medicine?" They say, "You're not yourself lately." They pretend concern, but every question is a scalpel, cutting deeper into trust. Soon the victim begins to see patterns where there are none, and misses patterns that are everywhere. That's when the killer knows. The mind has turned inward. Now it's theirs to rearrange. Psychologists call it induced dependency, a relationship where one controls reality itself. The victim no longer believes their own conclusions. They defer to the manipulator for guidance, for stability, for permission to exist correctly. In that dependency, the poisoner finds godlike stillness. They no longer need a vial or syringe. Their instrument is the human psyche. Their toxin is suggestion. Their patience is the medium. What makes this cruelty terrifying is its subtlety. There's no scream, no weapon, just a quiet degradation of self. Day by day, the victim's vocabulary shrinks, so their emotions flatten. They apologize for being in pain, and when help is offered, they refuse it, because their mind has been trained to protect its abuser. That's not affection, that's conditioning. Control becomes their oxygen, and like oxygen, it's invisible. They time their kindness like doses, a gift after an argument, a compliment after a lie, a soft hand after a cruel silence. The brain learns to crave the relief more than it resists the pain. This is not love. This is reinforcement. This is cruelty disguised as rhythm. Some of the most methodical killers in history began with empathy. They learned how to listen deeply, how to mirror emotions, how to read faces as if decoding a map. That skill, when inverted, becomes a weapon of exquisite precision. They know how long to wait before speaking, how to imitate remorse, how to apologize just enough to reset the game. The result isn't chaos, it's design, a choreography of pain measured in tone and silence. Investigators often find journals, letters, voice messages, nothing overtly incriminating, but in the margins, patterns, apologies that repeat, blame that always loops back to the victim. narratives rewritten until guilt changes owners. That's the slow killer's greatest trick, to make the victim feel responsible for their own suffering. And once that belief takes root, the killer no longer has to act. The mind does the rest. There's a word in forensic psychology, psychic inversion. It describes the moment a victim's perception flips, when the person causing harm becomes their only source of comfort. It's the cruelest form of imprisonment. No walls, no bars, only a reality edited so slowly that escape feels like betrayal. The poisoner doesn't need chains, they need patience. To them, love is not affection, it's architecture. They build it carefully, then live inside it with their victim until the structure collapses. When outsiders look in, they see devotion, photos, shared routines, harmony. But beneath the surface, every word is engineered, every touch rehearsed, every silence calibrated to maintain confusion. It's not chaos, it's craftsmanship. Some call this emotional homicide. It's not recognized by law, but it leaves the same absence. Friends say, "She changed. He used to be so full of life." They were inseparable. They don't see the erosion. They see the mask, because the mask, like poison, is meant to dissolve slowly, not reveal too soon, not alarm the witnesses, just fade naturally into tragedy. The slow killer finds peace in that illusion. They believe suffering must be elegant, controlled, invisible. They consider themselves curators of fate. They shape pain like sculptors, shape marble, chiseling away identity until only dependence remains. And when the sculpture finally breaks, they call it destiny, never cruelty. Destiny. In interviews, they rarely say, "I hurt them." They say, "I helped them become honest." They say, "They were better after me." It's delusion disguised as purpose. But inside that delusion lies a terrible truth. They believe it. Because once you control someone's mind long enough, you begin to believe you've healed them, that their obedience is gratitude, and their silence, peace. When profilers reconstruct the timeline, they notice the same thing each time. The cruelty wasn't random, it followed an internal logic. First, isolation, then confusion, then dependence, then guilt. Finally, surrender, the stages of slow psychological death. By the end, the victim no longer resists. They simply comply. Their heart still beats, but their sense of self no longer does. That's why these killers frighten even other killers, because they prove you don't need blood to destroy someone. You just need time. Cruelty that whispers instead of screams, control that comforts instead of commands, love that drains instead of gives. It's a paradox so perfect, it feels divine. And that's the seduction. In the end, psychological cruelty becomes a mirror. The killer sees themselves reflected in the victim's despair, a god admiring creation, a scientist admiring precision, a poet admiring rhythm. They don't feel guilt, they feel symmetry, because for them suffering is an art form, and patience the brush that paints it. Brush. They never build in haste. Every detail is measured, every silence accounted for, because for them, death is not destruction, it's design. The slow killer is not an improviser. They are an architect, one who constructs inevitability from patience and precision. Their workspace is the ordinary world, a kitchen, a bedside, a conversation over morning light. The materials are simple: trust, time, proximity. They build foundations out of familiarity, walls from routine, and the ceiling, composure. The victim never hears the hammering, only the gentle rhythm of reassurance, only the hum of life continuing, until one day that hum goes silent. To understand them, imagine an architect drawing blueprints in absolute quiet, each line drawn not in ink, but in intent. Every decision weighted against exposure. They don't ask, will it work? They ask, how can it not? The plan becomes a kind of scripture. No improvisation, no emotion, only the geometry of cruelty. Psychologists often describe them as engineers of calm. Their serenity is not a personality trait. It's infrastructure. It supports every action they take. Without calm, their structure collapses. That's why even during interrogation, their pulse remains steady, their tone neutral, their posture symmetrical. To them, chaos is the amateur's downfall. Control is the only aesthetic worth mastering. They do not panic when the body weakens. They do not celebrate when it dies. Their satisfaction lies in the smoothness of transition, the unbroken line from cause to consequence. It's the elegance of inevitability. The moment the plan becomes real without friction, no struggle, no noise, just the soft confirmation that everything behaved as intended. That's their signature, not brutality, efficiency. In one recorded interview, a poisoner said quietly, "I designed it, so no one had to clean up anything." It wasn't compassion, it was composition. He spoke about dosage like a mathematician, about timing like an artist discussing balance. To him, morality was clutter. Precision was purity. That's the architecture of death, the reduction of murder to geometry. Every slow killer has blueprints, whether written or mental. They rehearse the flow of conversation, the sequence of symptoms, the distance between lies. They think in intervals, 3 days for the first dose, 1 week for decline, 2 months for grief to settle. Then life resumes, quietly, efficiently, as if nothing extraordinary occurred. That illusion of normalcy is their favorite structure. It hides everything in plain sight. Their patience is not born from empathy. It's born from perfectionism. They can't tolerate imperfection in execution. The thought of being caught isn't terrifying. It's inelegant. They don't fear punishment. They fear blemish, an error in the line work, a detail left unmeasured. To them, sloppiness is sin. And sin disrupts design. This devotion to precision extends even to aftermath. They manage funerals, coordinate condolences, speak softly to investigators, fold grief into performance, each gesture calculated to appear appropriate. Not too cold, not too warm, just enough. Because too much emotion invites suspicion, too little dehumanizes. Their composure is choreography, performed for the living, dedicated to the dead. There's a phrase in forensic criminology, the serenity paradox. It describes killers who appear calmer after the crime than before it, as if the act itself releases tension rather than creates it. That calm is not peace, it's completion. Like an architect walking through a finished building, running fingertips along smooth walls, satisfied that the proportions hold. They don't see a corpse, they see closure. Every design reveals its maker. In the pattern of dosage, in the timing of events, in the very choice of method. Some prefer gradualism, a sickness mistaken for time itself. Others design theatrical inevitability. A fall, an accident, a final letter conveniently misplaced. Each method reveals aesthetic preference. Each reveals how they wish to be remembered, not as monsters, but as craftsmen. When the profiler studies these blueprints, they find traces of artistry hidden beneath cruelty, symmetry, balance, even rhythm. The killer's diary reads like a set of construction notes. Day 12, she stopped complaining of headaches. Day 18, lowered dosage to preserve realism. Day 26, no one suspects a thing. It's not confession, it's documentation, an archive of control. The calm architect rarely seeks pleasure from pain. Pleasure is too fleeting, too volatile. They seek satisfaction through confirmation, that the system works, that the formula is sound. That reality can still be bent by patience. It's intellectual supremacy disguised as gentleness. They believe they're proving a theory that control, applied slowly enough, becomes indistinguishable from nature. And yet, beneath that serenity, there's fracture, a hunger for validation that never fully feeds. Because the perfection they seek requires imperfection to exist. Without victims, there's no design. Without decay, no proof of mastery. They depend on destruction to feel complete. That dependency is their hidden flaw. The crack in the marble. They cannot stop building, even when the structure is done. So they start again. New plan, new victim, new symmetry to chase. Forensic analysts often find repetition, patterns almost identical from case to case. Same poison, same pacing, same quiet aftermath. As if the architect keeps redrawing the same building, hoping one day to make it perfect. It never is. Perfection collapses the moment it's achieved. So they keep designing, forever rebuilding the illusion of mastery. That's what keeps them calm. That's what keeps them alive. They don't dream of chaos. They dream of control that outlives them. A structure so seamless it becomes invisible. A death so silent it becomes memory, not mystery. They believe that if they design it well enough, the world will never know. That anonymity is the ultimate symmetry. To vanish into one's own creation. To let the structure stand and the architect disappear. In the end, what they build isn't murder, it's order. A quiet masterpiece of timing and deceit. They aren't haunted by ghosts. They are haunted by unfinished designs. And until the final one stands complete, they will keep drafting in the dark, measuring, adjusting, and waiting for stillness to approve. Because for them, the calm isn't after the kill. The calm is the kill. Every act leaves residue. Not all of it can be cleaned. There are stains that chemistry can't detect, patterns that linger in memory, and atmospheres that never quite dissipate. When a slow killer is gone, what remains isn't the body count. It's the architecture of control they left behind, the silence they built, the order they imposed, the calm they infected the world with. In death, their crimes are often misunderstood because the evidence of patience is not visible. The fingerprints fade, the bottles are discarded, the bodies are buried, but the design, the methodical, invisible rhythm of domination remains. It seeps into others, it rewrites behaviors, it survives through imitation, fascination, study. They didn't just kill people. They taught the world a new way to do it. There's an unsettling truth in criminology. The calmest murderers inspire the most analysis. The louder ones are remembered as monsters. The quiet ones are remembered as mysteries. Mystery immortalizes. Each generation rediscovers them through documentaries, forensic textbooks, psychology lectures, films that try to decode what cannot be named. But the truth is simpler. They didn't seek fame. They sought completion. And even in capture, even in execution, their calm never cracks. Because to them, discovery is not defeat. It's acknowledgement. What makes them eternal is not their cruelty. It's their control. Control so precise it becomes philosophy. Control so patient it becomes religion. They remind us, terrifyingly, that violence doesn't need motion, that domination can exist in stillness, that waiting, when weaponized, is indistinguishable from godhood. That's their legacy, a quiet invitation for others to believe that if you wait long enough, the world will kneel. In the archives, their case files read like blueprints, symptoms mapped to days, responses cataloged, a perfect choreography between invisibility and attention. You can almost sense admiration in the language of investigators. Words like calculated, disciplined, intelligent. Even the people tasked with condemning them end up using the language of respect. It's the final irony that control earns reverence, even when it kills. The victims, though, they are rarely remembered in detail. Their names blur into the medical reports. Their lives become side notes, because the narrative has already been designed to orbit the killer. That, too, is part of the legacy. Their control continues long after they're gone. It shapes the story itself. They still command the stage from the grave, dictating focus, tone, and fascination. The real poison was never in the cup. It was in the narrative. In psychological literature, this phenomenon has a name: posthumous authority. It's the persistence of control after physical death. The idea that certain personalities, particularly those who mastered manipulation, continue to influence behavior long after their own ends. Letters found, notes decoded, patterns rediscovered decades later. Each rediscovery becomes a reenactment. Each retelling renews their power. We keep giving them time, exactly what they always wanted. That's why their calm feels contagious, because it isn't just emotional, it's structural. They designed systems of delay, and now those systems outlive them. Every cautious pause in a conversation, every withheld truth, every manipulation disguised as care. Their method bleeds into culture, into relationships, into institutions. Cruelty becomes refined. Control becomes moralized. Patience becomes virtue. We call it strategy. They called it survival. Some historians argue that the slow killer represents a deeper human truth, that the desire to control time is universal. We all measure, predict, postpone. We all weaponize patience in smaller ways, to withhold forgiveness, to ration affection, to delay answers for effect. Their pathology is our reflection, stretched to its extreme. That's why their stories disturb us, because they reveal what restraint becomes when stripped of conscience. In interrogation recordings, one profiler asked, "Why didn't you just stop?" The killer smiled and replied, "Because it was still working." That answer encapsulates everything: the absence of moral endpoint, the presence of technical momentum. They didn't kill for pleasure. They killed for continuity, to preserve the perfection of a system in motion. They saw the act not as a crime, but as maintenance. Even after capture, their serenity remains intact. Courtrooms become laboratories of composure. Journalists call it arrogance. Psychiatrists call it flat affect. But what it really is consistency. The architecture holds. The mask never slips. The final proof that their design was sound, that because even when stripped of freedom, they still command the room through calm. They still dictate pace. They still decide when to speak. They die as they lived. Not fast, not loud, but in control. Years later, their faces fade from headlines, but their methods resurface under new names. Different poisons, different justifications, same patience. The legacy mutates. It's not passed genetically, but psychologically. Anyone who learns that control can feel divine risks inheriting the impulse, the desire to wait, to manage, to dominate through time. It begins again, quietly, like a whisper beneath a heartbeat. In the end, their true immortality isn't in crime records, it's in imitation. Every manipulator who believes calm equals power is echoing them. Every strategist who mistakes detachment for wisdom is repeating their language. Every person who withholds truth to feel superior is practicing a diluted version of the same art. That's the contagion. That's the poison that never stops spreading. And yet, Within that darkness, there's a warning, because control, left unchecked, always turns inward. It corrodes the one who wields it. Even the calmest architects eventually crumble, not from guilt, but from exhaustion. The effort to maintain perfection demands too much silence, too much suppression, too much waiting. Time becomes the final poisoner. In the quiet of their final hours, every slow killer meets the same reflection, their own stillness staring back. They realize that the only thing left to control is how they stop breathing, and in that last moment, they understand what the victims felt all along: the inevitability of decay, the surrender of agency, the slow disintegration of certainty. Their legacy completes itself, turning inward, closing the circle. When investigators file the last report, when the lights fade in the courtroom, when the cameras turn off, the silence that follows feels familiar. It's the same silence the killers adored, still, measured, perfectly balanced between horror and peace. That silence is their monument, invisible, enduring, unfinished, because in the end control doesn't disappear. It transforms, from act to echo, from plan to myth, from killer to idea. And ideas, like poison, don't die, they just wait.